Welcome back. You're watching our special coverage here on CNBC TV 18, the impact of demonetization on the upcoming budget as well as the rollout of the GST. Our expert panel still with us. Mani, you just heard Hasib Drabu, the Finance Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, and perhaps a little more accurate representation of what's transpiring within the GST Council meeting, minus some of the politics, because Jain, in that sense, not an interested party. So what did you make of what Mr. Drabu said, and do you believe that July 1 is what we should work with now?
Yeah, as I said before, I still continue to think that July 1 is eminently workable. And even if we consider the fact that the GST bill is going to be placed in the second half of the budget session, even then July 1 seems to be, doable to me. And I would not go too much by what anyone says, because for the last, I think, hour, we have been hearing conflicting voices from various people, as you had pointed out some time, back. But at a broad level, all that I would say is that, assuming it's going to be, July, we should have an announcement sooner than later indicating and informing business that it's going to be July, so that people can gear up and people can start. GST is more of a business change. It's not merely a tax change. And the sooner we have clarity in terms of the end date, the better businesses will be prepared to handle GST. On the other hand, if anyone in the government feels that it's going to be 1st of September, I'm good with that as well, provided that gets announced over the next few days or so that people have time to prepare.
In fact, we're waiting for the finance minister, and maybe this is going to be an issue that he will address in some form or fashion, though I don't believe that the GST Council has taken a call on this just yet. So, Hari, realistically now, if you go by what Mr. Drabu says, then it's just a question of getting dual control done. It's not, he doesn't believe it's such a vexed issue. Other state finance ministers, also seem to agree that it's a question of give and take, and then perhaps the centre will now have to concede some ground on that issue. So realistically, what would it take for a breakthrough there?
Shereen, in my view, I would still say we'll have to wait for the 16th meeting. July 1st is very much on. And one other fact which I mentioned yesterday is that, which I think many of us are missing, is that the Ministry of Finance has referred this entire IGST administration issue to the Attorney General. They are awaiting an opinion. We all knew that there was a Law Ministry missive that came back saying that it's well within the powers of centre. So they are trying to figure out some kind of a solution and some kind of a rapprochement, or to break this impasse, because to me that is the biggest impasse. If they're able to break that impasse, the other issues of territorial waters and compensation can be sorted out, because I don't think those are pretty large issues. They really can be sorted out. The whole issue is dual empowerment, and like Mr.
Hari,
Drabu,
the finance minister speaking, so let's just listen into Mr. Jaitley.
And a half-day meeting today of the state finance ministers for the purposes of pre-budget consultations. Yesterday, there were 6 different sectors of the economy: banking, insurance, aviation, railways, exports, which amongst others made detailed presentations with regard to the requirements of their sectors before the GST Council. Some of them also made a point that particularly the telecom IT industries, that was the 6th segment, that they wanted centralized registration. Telecom, IT, banking, insurance made their case for a centralized registration really on the basis of the nature of their business. A person can sit and make a digital payment in one state, it will be registered, his account may be in some other state, the transaction of purchase may be in relation to a third state, and therefore they said really rather than go interstate, they should have a central registration benefit, and then they can devise a system by which the share of taxation of each state in the transaction could be split up. So was the case of the IT industry, which said that their softwares envisage programming where data could initiate from multiple jurisdictions and reach multiple jurisdictions. Therefore, instead of going around getting registrations, give us the facility of a single registration. That's an administrative issue. That doesn't have anything to do with the legal drafts of the legislations on which the council will eventually, after it finishes its current work, will take a view. The third IGST law was discussed. It has 11 chapters. The initial 10 chapters really have been approved. And some issues remain open because they are in the process of being discussed. We'll be meeting again because the nature of discussion was inconclusive. We'll be meeting again on the 16th of this month, and I have a sitting to really conclude the discussion on those specific points. The drafts have been now, the legal drafts with the gaps, the gap means the undecided issue, are now being sent for legal vetting, after which they'll be circulated in the GST Council for a formal approval. Now, obviously, when I refer to the gaps, it refers predominantly to 2 or 3 issues, or issues falling under 2 big heads. And if I may just illustratively explain to you, the first retains to the definition of the word territory, and the second deals with both cross-empowerment and dual control. These could be technically 2 separate issues, but they can be, for classification purposes, clubbed into one. The issue of territory, it's a complex issue. The issue broadly is that area within 12 nautical miles into the sea is a part of Indian territory. And a question does arise, whose territory is it? Conventionally, service tax and customs is charged in those territories by the government of India. And some states had, as far as the fishing business is concerned, the Constitution provides for fishing rights to the states in that area. What about other taxes? Some states have been levying taxes in the nature of sales tax or VAT. The center has not levied it. So the case of the states is that since we've been levying taxes, we should be allowed to levy taxes. The contra-argument is this strictly does not fall within the definition of a state territory. And under Article 366, sub-Article 30, this is to be considered as a unionly administered territory. It's a union territory. Because the definition of a union territory in the Constitution is that what is not a part of a scheduled state is a union territory. Now, this issue has been pending in courts also and is currently before the Supreme Court. And before the Supreme Court, the government of India, which earlier was not very active in this litigation because it was between the assessees and the state governments, had some years ago jumped in and taken a stand that this is my territory, so I must be allowed to raise taxes in it. the case of the states is that we should be allowed to raise tax in this. So it's an issue which has to be, a constitutional solution has to be followed. And the solution has to be legally tenable. So I have told the council that we are examining it and we will try and see how this can be legally managed, because the answer to this problem is not political or not even an arrangement between the center or the states. It has to be found within the framework of the constitution, that if it is union territory, can a state levy a tax within the unionly administered territory? They can do it only in their own territory. So it's a pure constitutional issue. The minister from Karnataka has suggested a particular formulation, which we will consider. So the issue is, if I may say, very close to resolution, but we need a legal response to it. It has to be adequately tested. The next issue is with regard to the administration of the IGST and the cross-empowerment and the dual control and its management. Now, this is a complex issue on which we've discussed on a couple of times earlier. We haven't found a solution. I must say today, most states, many of the states were, an overwhelming majority, I would say, of the states had a very positive attitude. And we started the discussion, which was inconclusive. And we've decided to meet on the 16th again, so that we are able to untie the knots as far as this issue is concerned. And of course, post-lunch, there was a meeting which every state government presented their own perspective and wish list of what should be done as far as the union budget. Ask the states to furnish us the data and also give us the comparative data of the last 2-3 years, so that month to month pattern we can study.
Sir, monetization पे एक और इशू ये है कि जो 31st के बाद RBI में ही केवल जमा कराने का है, इससे लेकर के काफी परेशानी हो गई है। केवल आपने 5 जगह की बात की, दिल्ली, मुंबई, कोलकाता, चेन्नई और नागपुर, और पहले जो PM का अनाउंसमेंट था उसमें ये था कि 31 मार्च तक सभी कर सकते हैं। तो अब जो ये नया ऑर्डिनेंस, और
PM का ये नहीं था, PM ने स्पेसिफिक कहा था कि उसकी टर्म्स और कंडीशंस कौन कर सकता है, RBI देगी. The word terms and conditions was a part of the PM's address.
लेकिन परेशानी तो काफी हो रही है सर.
देखिए, हर एक के पास 50 दिन की सुविधा थी और बड़ी से बड़ी मात्रा में लोग आ चुके हैं, तो परेशानी वाले तो बचे ही बहुत कम हैं अब.
But sir, if genuinely some people could not deposit the money earlier for whatever
देखिए,
reason, can
no,
it
we
still
don't
be
go into whatever reasons. The RBI has fixed their own criteria, and at least I will respect that criteria.
कहा है कि चुनाव आयोग ने चुनाव की तारीख की घोषणा कर दी, ऐसे में केंद्र सरकार को 1 फरवरी को बजट पेश नहीं करना चाहिए, तो उनकी मांगों में कितना दम देकर विचार करेंगे?
सर, कई दलों ने राष्ट्रपति को चिट्ठी भी लिखी है इसी बाबत।
मैंने पढ़ा है उनके चिट्ठी।
आपका क्या मत है?
नहीं, ये वही दल हैं जो कहते हैं कि डिमोनेटाइजेशन की लोकप्रियता बहुत कम है, तो फिर वो बजट से क्यों परेशान है?
2012 में ऐसा किया गया था जब यही 5 राज्यों के चुनाव थे, तो 15-16 मार्च को बजट पेश किया गया था, तो इस बार
देखिए, हर बार की परंपरा तो है नहीं। मतलब लोकसभा चुनाव से तुरंत पहले इंटरिम बजट पेश किया जाता है, आज तक तो रुका नहीं है। मतलब 2014 के चुनाव से भी कुछ दिन पहले इंटरिम बजट पेश हुआ नहीं हुआ, हर चुनाव से पहले होता है, वो तो एक संवैधानिक आवश्यकता है।
उस समय फुल बजट 16 मार्च।
Sir, 31st December is now way past. We're getting to hear now that 15 lakh crores almost has come back into the system.
I don't know the number, but when you know it, please tell me.
डुअल कंट्रोल को लेकर क्या कोई नए फॉर्मूले पे विचार हो रहा है? बात कहाँ किस तरह से?
देखिए, मैंने आपको कहा कि अधिकतर लोगों का एटीट्यूड उस पर काफी पॉजिटिव है, इसका कोई हल ढूंढने के लिए।
Some states are saying they want higher compensation now post demonetization because there have been revenue losses to the states.
देखिए, compensation is not linked to demonetization.
Sir, if most states are in favor of dual control, the way, if there is a consensus of dual control among most states, why don't you go for voting instead of an outright consensus?
देखिए, I have been consciously avoiding the voting, and I'll give you the reason why. GST Council is a federal institution, and a federal institution in a large democracy like India, it's a very delicate organization. And therefore, the fact that we have been so far able to resolve every issue by discussions, at times even long discussions, I think we want to establish this as an initial precedent of how the council functions, because its initial functioning will be cited as a precedent. Now, if you, instead of resolving it by a consensus and a discussion, if you in the very first instance start going in for voting without exploring all possibilities of a consensus, it won't be a good initial practice. Then this voting would be every year when you fix various decisions, the same practices will apply. So we want to use the avoid voting as far as possible as a settled practice. And I have said so in the council, so I have no hesitation of saying it here.
सर, डिजिटल पेमेंट पर इंसेंटिव क्या कंटिन्यू रखा जाएगा अभी? डिजिटल पेमेंट पर जो
घोषणा की है जिनकी, वो चलेंगे।
States have also asked for FRBM relaxation.
अब आप बजट पहली तारीख की इंतजार कीजिए ना।
Are you planning to incentivize cash transactions?
बैंकों से पैसे लेने की लिमिट है वो जारी रहेगी, एटीएम की लिमिट बढ़ाई गई है, ये लिमिट कब तक हटने की संभावना?
देखिए, आरबीआई तय करेगा मार्केट की सिचुएशन असेस करते हुए, और कई बार एक्शंस भी फेजेस में लिए जाते हैं, रिलैक्सेशंस भी फेजेस में होते हैं।
So like you are incentivizing digital transactions, are you also planning to disincentivize cash transactions?
देखिए, ये कोई एज अ पॉलिसी अब मैं अनाउंस नहीं कर रहा। इफ गवर्नमेंट टेक्स अ डिसीजन, वी विल लेट यू नो।
So how will the tax rates be split under GST? Will it be equally split between the center and the states? Some states have asked for a higher.
देखिए, उसका एक there is a presentation which was made. Everybody is acting on a particular premise, but some issues do keep arising. So the council will formally decide that.
But the center hasn't taken a view.
You see, the center had broadly taken a view in the initial presentations when we totaled up of the base year, the revenue of the states and the center, and it was found to be broadly equal.
Sir, since
the states have also said that the compensation amount will have to be the sources of the center will have to tap more sources to compensate states now, and the earlier estimated amount of 55,000 crores will be revised.
Uska pura formula, that there is a complete consensus which has been approved on that in the compensation.
Sir, since the entire demonetization exercise has almost come to an end, so there have been a lot of demands from Congress party and other parties also
So that RBI should come out with the minutes of the meeting which has been taken place on November of 8 when the entire demonetization was announced. So since it has already been come to an end, why don't you think that RBI should come out?
Why should I express an opinion on
and since most of the decisions were taken by the Finance Ministry and the government all together in consultation with the RBI, so it will help the because the image which has been dented.
It's an issue for the RBI to decide.
Sir,
you called for data, revenue data of states. So what is that for? Some compensation or something, or just?
No, just let us know the facts. कि किसका कितना बड़ा है, कितना कम हुआ है.
But is there an estimate available that how much will be compensated?
जब वो स्थिति आएगी तो देखेंगे ना. बर्बाद नहीं हुआ, 8 बार में 16 निर्णय हो चुके हैं.
The Bengal finance minister came out and spoke to the media, and he said that because of demonetization, Bengal has lost 13%. He says there's a 2% negative growth in their revenue and 13%.
I think states which are governed well have earned well.
Punjab, Haryana, both have got positive growth.
Punjab, Haryana, Assam, all the states mentioned today that their revenues have increased.
Sir, we are talking about revenue of the state.
By 30 to 40%.
Sir, we are talking about revenue of the
The
state.
2% that he mentioned inside the meeting became 30% outside.
Sir, we are talking about the revenue of state. What is the position of central revenue? Because advanced revenue, tax revenue numbers are.
So there was another point that West Bengal FM raised. He said that even the numbers put out by the center by the Union FM, they were basically from the April onwards, and they were not actually reflecting the uptick in the current, in the current last 2 months.
Sir, on the compensation funds, so far the government had estimated close to 55,000 crore rupees post, the demonetization activity. Will we see an uptick? Because yesterday also some of the FMs, West Bengal FM.
देखिए, मेरा अपना असेसमेंट ये है कि एक क्वार्टर छोड़ने के बाद जो इंटीग्रेशन ऑफ लार्जर इंटीग्रेशन ऑफ इनफॉर्मल इकोनॉमी विद द फॉर्मल इकोनॉमी होगा, उसमें रेवेन्यू सबके बढ़ने वाले हैं. That is the purpose of this exercise. In fact, despite all this, I can tell you the Revenue Secretary is here and he can confirm this. We will end this year with higher revenues, both direct and indirect taxes. Can we comfortably say this to
100%.
Non-budgeted.
Higher than budgeted. So not only are we going to reach the budget estimates, we will exceed the budget estimates both in direct tax and in indirect tax this year. And therefore, with a larger formal economy and integration of informal into formal, I think unless some state is very badly administered and loses out on investment, the revenues of the others are going to increase.
So today at the Chief Election Commission, CEC's press conference, these questions were asked about the 1st of February budget date, because Punjab and Goa votes barely 72 hours after the budget. So do you think, would the government even seriously consider these suggestions? Because Prime Minister recently had made a presentation at spoke at Niti Aayog, where he said that this was done basically to help farmers so that disbursements become,
You see, that's one of the objects behind advancing the budget date. That is to say, the actual expenditure must start from April rather than half the year being lost and starting after the monsoons. That is the whole object of this exercise, and we stand by that exercise.
So 6th January we'll have the full fiscal GDP data. Is it likely to be on RBI lines?
Why should I take a guess?
Thank you.
Well, that was the Finance Minister. And as we've been discussing, and the Finance Minister saying that what transpires within the GST Council meeting is very different from what Finance Ministers express outside of the GST Council meeting. But, sum and substance of what the finance minister seemed to suggest is that yes, negotiations have been impacted, but he's still hopeful. In fact, he said that an overwhelming majority of state governments had a positive attitude when it came to the issue of resolving dual control. He hopes that on the 16th of January, that's when the next GST Council meeting takes place, the issue of territory and the issue of dual control will both be concluded. But more importantly there, the finance minister defending demonetization, saying that he believes that for this year, there will be an increase in both direct and indirect taxes, in fact higher than the budget estimate. So that is going to be something that the government is betting on, and they believe that post a quarter's pain, we could see an uptick in revenue collections across the board. That's the word coming in from the finance minister. Let me bring in a quick reaction from each of our guests. Mani, let me start by asking you, a long press conference there from the finance minister, didn't really say very much, but what's your own sense of what you heard and the possibility of a breakthrough on January 16th?
I thought that he was incredibly upbeat considering what we had been hearing until he spoke. He seemed to be very, very upbeat in terms of the GST introduction, and that I think is very good because he was very, very confident. The only thing I wish he had done was to indicate some kind of a date on which people could anchor themselves and people could start preparing. Because it's one thing to be upbeat in terms of what's going to happen in the next meeting.
I guess they'll do that post the 16th, Mani. I think maybe to be fair, they'll probably do that on the 16th. If there is a breakthrough or there is no breakthrough on the 16th, then perhaps they will set some sort of an indicative timeline.
Yeah, if they do that, that will be very, very, good. But we need to keep in mind that when we are approaching 16th, we are getting closer to the budget and we are getting closer to the state elections. So at that point of time, what kind of dynamics will play out in the next meeting is something which I think we need to wait and watch.
All right, Pratik, again, the finance minister sounding much more upbeat than the state finance ministers that we've been listening to. But as he pointed out, perhaps, the state finance ministers who do come out and speak are positioning negotiations with a certain color. We've tried, of course, to speak to as many who talk, from J&K to Kerala to West Bengal to Haryana to Gujarat. But on the basis of what you've heard from the finance minister and also that very confident claim that the finance minister made that both on indirect as well as direct tax collections, they will beat the budget estimates. Your reaction?
No, that's good to hear. I mean, frankly, I thought that perhaps because of the demand compression, you will, at least on the indirect tax side, you will see a bit of a slowdown. But I'm sure that finance minister has good reason to be optimistic on that, and also he has good reasons to be upbeat. But I didn't hear really what are the options which is being worked out to resolve the issue of dual control, and that comes as a bit of a disappointment. And every time when you hear the the minister speak, while we talk about the majority agreement, if you're not going for a voting, a majority approving an idea will not really work, right? I mean, all of them have to agree, and that really seems to be a distant sort of goal as of now. So unless we really hear anything tangible that how this issue of dual control the government is proposing to resolve, I'm personally not too sure as to whether what will happen on 16th of January. One would hope that something happens, but there's no clarity as yet.
Yeah. Okay, Sachin, final word to you. What have you made of it, and what would your expectation be now on the 16th? Are you going in with tempered expectations when it comes to dual control and a possible breakthrough?
Well, I think now, rather than the economics or the country's interest, I think what is playing out is mainly politics. So no finance minister can give a estimated date, or so if he is given a date, then it will be seen as he is overstepping the GST Council and giving a date of his own.
Yeah.
That could have rubbed so many egos within the GST Council. So that is maybe the reason why he is not committing to a date. Neither any finance minister of any other state could commit a date, because the same issue there also. So having said that, one thing which he said was very, very striking, that though perhaps they could have managed to get voting and push through this, whatever the issues pending. They don't want to do that because GST Council is actually is an example of the cooperative federalism, how successful it is.
Right.
They want to set a positive trend, and therefore they want to have a consensus. Is a great idea which he manifested. Having said that, in this budget, as far as the government is concerned, the optimism and going on record in public to say that we will exceed the budget estimations is a bold statement, according to me.
It is. It is a bold statement. Gentlemen, we will leave it there. Thanks very much for your time. Thanks very much for joining us. We will check in with you on the 16th of January. That's when the GST Council will meet next. Appreciate you joining us here.